So today we are going to conclude the top-down parsers, especially the type of parsers we are discussing, which, as we will see shortly, is known as the LL1 parsers. So today's class is actually not going to be pretty long. We'll be recapping some things. We'll be concluding the session and with the top-down parser, and we'll just be introducing you to the bottom-up parser, so that we can uh, devote ourselves to bottom-up parsers in the next week. I'm assuming it should be over by next week because, okay, let us talk about the timings next week. That's what Pranay was discussing. So, as you know, that from next week onward, labs will be held offline in the physical mode. Means you have to come to college and be there present in the lab um, during the lab hours, which will be specified. These lab hours are different than the lab hours which you have been familiar with. Okay, so you will see some changes in the routine, which will be coming up shortly in the Heritage Notice Board, like Heritage website. So please keep an eye on it. It should have been there by today, but probably it's going to be delayed a little bit. So what you can do is keep an eye on the notice board regarding the new routine. There you will see that there are some significant changes in the theory and lab schedules. Uh, for the theory part, the theory will continue to be in the online mode. And for compilers, there won't be any change in the theory schedule. So you will have a double lecture on Wednesdays and a single lecture on Friday next week also. So we should be able to cover most of bottom-up parsers, if not everything, uh, but almost I would say 75% to 80% of bottom-up parsers will be covered by next week, followed by the following week where we'll be concluding. So for next 2 weeks we'll be having the theory schedule just like what we are having this week, like online class on Wednesdays and Fridays. Okay, the timings are exactly the same. Modality is also the same. Now, note one thing very carefully. 19th is supposed to be a holiday, but our institute is not declaring it a holiday on 19th. I think the holiday is declared on 20th, which is a Saturday. So there may be some reasons for that. I don't want to go about that. But on 19th, we are going to have this class. So next week, we are going to have all 3 theory classes. Please note this. Okay, don't listen to anybody else. People may be saying, okay, there won't be any theory class or there may be holidays on 19th. So please don't listen to them. You be present in these classes as scheduled. It is reflected in the routine as well. Regarding lab classes, please be careful. Of course, you will get the notice and you will get the routine also. So for your section, for section B, group 3 will be coming on Tuesdays and group 4 will be coming on Thursdays. Okay, at least for next 2-3 weeks. Now, from 18, that is from Thursday onward, we know for sure that you have to come according to the schedule. So group 4 and group 3 from next week onward, you can be very much assured that you have to come to the college for attending the physical lab. The lab will be held probably at B10, ICT B10. I'll be there along with some technical assistants. For group 4 on Thursday, like 18th, you have to come before 9. Like the lab will start at 9 and it will continue till 12:45. That is the thing which is shown in the routine. We might actually not conduct the class till 12:45. It might be a little earlier, maybe, I don't know, maybe 12, 12:15, something like that. Okay. And there would be actually 2 labs instead of 1 lab. So we are combining 2 labs on that day. Okay. So I'll be getting you some materials by this weekend. what you can expect in this lab. So you have to come to the lab and be there from 9 to 12:45. Okay. Now this is for group 4, 1 means the subgroup 1. Okay. So it will be around first 20% in group 4. First 20 students in group 4. Okay. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, for example, our group 4 is starting from 20, so 20 to 40.
Something like that. Okay. The exact division will be also mailed to you. So on Thursday, group 4 will come. This Thursday, I'm talking about 18th. This Thursday, group 4 will come and they will be having the lab from 9. First subgroup will be having the lab from 9 to 12:45. The second group, that is the second subgroup of group 4, will be having the lab from 1:45 to 5:30. Again, it might not continue till 5:30. It might be continuing till 5:15, and there may be some break in between. Okay, so same lab is repeated twice for the same group. Like group 4, only one lab was held per week. Now there will be 2 into 2. So there are going to be 4 labs per week for whole of group 4. For each of the subgroup, there will be 2 labs. Am I clear?
Yes, sir. Sir, I had one question.
Yes.
Sir, in the lab, when the system that to make here that the assignment we submit one body per group in your Google Classroom. So when we'll meet physical, so we have to follow the same way.
Yeah, you have to follow the same way. Now, if there are students who are from different subgroups, it doesn't really matter because the assignment is same. Okay. If they are across the group, like one is in group 3 and one is in group 4, I'll let you know. Okay, if such conditions happen. Okay. In general, there is less probability of that.
Actually, sir, in my group, my 2 members are from group 3. So I am
Yeah,
from
we'll
group
talk
4.
about that. We'll talk about
Yes,
all
sir,
those
yes.
things in the physical lab. Okay. And I think one student told me she didn't find any lab partner, so I'll try to fix her with some groups. Okay, some subgroups, some body groups. So I'll take care of that once the physical class starts, physical lab starts.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, actually, I have to go for an important work, and I'm from Group 4. So can I come with Group 3, sir?
I don't know. Okay, frankly speaking, you have to probably ask the HOD. Okay, I think it's better
Because
to
it is
email
very
HOD.
urgent.
Okay,
Medical
that you
issue.
can explain to HOD and get the approval. If
Okay,
approval
sir.
comes, I have no problem. Okay.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Okay. In general, such things are not permitted. Acha. Now, regarding Tuesday, this Tuesday, 16th,
Yes, sir.
we are not sure. Okay. That is the day we are supposed to have the lab. So I still don't know exactly what will happen on that day. On 18th, Group 4 will definitely have their labs. I mean, as it is, without any disturbance or interruption. But since this is the first day on 16th, we are having this institute opened after so much time. So I am not very sure what will actually happen, whether we'll be able to conduct the labs. My suggestion is that you come at 9. Okay. You means all of you should come at 9. Because for if I say that group 3 is divided into two subgroups, the first subgroup will have the lab from 9 and the other subgroup will be doing their project work. Okay, so they might meet their teachers or things like that, and it will be exactly opposite for the afternoon session. So the second subgroup will have their lab from 1:45 and the first subgroup will actually be busy with project work. That is the thing which is shown in the routine. Okay, now if you want to come a little late because you don't want to do the project work, I don't have any problem. Or if you want to leave early because there is no project work to be done, that is up to you. Okay, but my suggestion would be that the one subgroup which has the lab should come at 9. Now, if there are things happening where which is actually preventing the lab, we can't help. And because this is the first day, chances are that most of the things may not be very much ready. and you might be busy socializing and stuff like that. So such things cannot be ruled out. In fact, principal can call for n number of meetings regarding the procedures to be followed. You might be having lectures after lectures, like what to do and what not to do. Okay. So, for example, you come and you start hugging each other. I mean, that kind of thing might be prohibited. I mean, don't mind. I mean, okay, Pranay, okay, is that fine? I mean, you meet your friend and you start like hugging and going to football ground and have a football match. These things might not be permitted. I mean, sorry to say for the timing. You might be having to go through the school kind of environment for a few days. Okay. So those things will be told in detail. So that's why I am a little skeptical, particularly for the morning lab on Tuesday. Even we don't know whether we have to go or what needs to be done. But definitely on 18th, Group 4 will have their lab. Now, please note that the next week, both the labs will be held completely as it is. The timings might be a little different. Okay. So we might actually circularly shift, like Group 4 may be coming on Tuesday, next Tuesday, and Group 3 may be coming on Thursday, and such things can happen. Okay. So we'll tell that during the online, during the physical lab. Okay. Am I clear? Any of you have any more questions? Yes? Nobody? Okay. Then I can go to the class today. I don't have too many things for today. I just wanted to take things a little bit easily because we might be having more theory classes in December when your labs will be over, hopefully. So today what I want to say is we'll do a brief recap of what we have learned so far in parsers. So we have already seen context-free grammars, derivation trees or parse trees, leftmost, rightmost derivations, ambiguity, and how can we eliminate ambiguity using left factoring, then left recursion elimination, which is an important part for top-down parser because otherwise it can go into infinite loop. Now, then we move to the details of top-down parsing. So we said that top-down parsing is basically an attempt to find a leftmost derivation for an input string. So that is what parsing is all about. You are given an input string and you try to find out whether there is a valid derivation. In this case, it is a leftmost derivation. We'll see that it's not always the case. Like for bottom-up parser, we are not going to stick to leftmost derivation. We'll do something else. So the end result is basically construction of a parse tree, which we have shown in detail in the last class. Pranay was participating enthusiastically. Nobody else participated, but that was a very important class. So if you get a chance, you probably want to revise what I did on that day. Now, recursive descent parser, we have already talked about. It's basically descends over the parse tree in a recursive manner, calling the recursive functions. You can have a backtracking RD parser. And we have already mentioned that backtracking parsers are not good. So we went to predictive parser where you never have to, will never have the compulsion to try the backtracking. You'll always make a deterministic move. Either you go to the reach the goal or you don't. Now, we also talked about the non-recursive predictive parsers, which is basically going to be a table-driven parser. And the table we have to construct. So we were devoting ourselves entirely to the construction of the predictive parsing table. Then we talked about how we can compute the first and follow symbols. We have the grammar with us and we computed the first and follow symbol. So first symbol was very important. When we created the parsing table like this, as you can see, this parsing table has non-terminals on the row headers and terminals on the column headers. So each table is a combination of a non-terminal and a terminal. Now, non-terminal symbols are coming from the grammar and terminal symbols are also from the grammar, but there is a special relationship between the non-terminal and the terminal. Like, for example, E comma plus, you can only have a rule there if you see that the right hand side of the rule is actually going to produce a plus symbol. Means, for example, E producing TE prime, and if T produces a plus as a first symbol, then you can have the rule E producing TE prime. As you can see, the first of T doesn't have, actually it has plus, so you can, it doesn't have a first, so you can say that that entry should be blank. It's
Sir,
basically
here I will not able to use stack.
No. I'm not going to the stack right now. I'm just saying how to create the predictive parsing table. Okay, from the grammar and first and follow symbols. Okay, so you can only put an entry in a particular, but you can only put a rule in a particular table entry if the terminal is actually the first symbol of the right hand side of the rule. Like you can see that E producing TE prime and T, if T produces plus as the first symbol, then you can easily put the entry E producing TE prime in that cell, E comma plus. But as you can see, first of T does not have plus in it, so you cannot do that. Or if T produces epsilon, then E prime should be producing plus. But as you can see, T does not produce epsilon, so we cannot have any entry in E comma plus. But we can have an entry in E comma ID, because first of T does produce ID, as you can see from the rules. So E comma ID should be in that particular cell entry.
Sir, I can
Similarly,
say in the opening braces that F produce opening braces.
yeah, of course. For F comma open parenthesis, you should have the rule F producing open parenthesis E, then closing parenthesis. That rule should be there, because of course it is generating the open parenthesis on the right hand side as the first symbol. Okay. Now there is another type of entry you can have, like for example, if you have something like E prime producing epsilon. In that case, you can understand that E prime will give rise to or give way to whatever symbol which follows it. So that means if you have a symbol, say E prime comma dollar, that cell, if you look at, dollar is in follow set of E prime, and E prime does produce epsilon. So you can easily give the rule E prime produces epsilon in the E prime comma dollar cell. That is the second row last cell. So there you can give the rule E prime comma epsilon. So these rules actually tell that you have to erase that symbol at that point of time. Okay, that's what it means. So if you don't have epsilon, you basically look for the first symbol, which can be generated from the right hand side of the grammar, right hand side of the production rule. If you have a epsilon producing rule, then you watch out for the follow symbol if it is there in the follow set of this particular non-terminal. That means this non-terminal will give rise to the follow terminal using that production rule E prime producing epsilon. So these are the set of rules which you can use to construct the parsing table, predictive parsing table, non-recursive predictive parsing table. Now this is where you can see the rules which we are talking about. As you can see, E prime producing epsilon is there in dollar and closing parenthesis, because they are both in the follow set of E prime. In most of the other cases where there is no epsilon producing rule, you have the right hand side of the production rule producing the terminal which is appearing at the column head as the first symbol. So this is where the predictive parsing table construction ends. You can see there are some blank entries, like E comma plus is a blank entry. That means if you have it non-terminal E on the stack, which you are using for constructing the parse tree using this parsing algorithm, if you get a plus and your stack top symbol is E, then it's going to throw an error. All these entries which are not defined, where there is no production rule defined, means they are going to produce error. These are the syntax errors which the parser will catch. Now, what happens if you have multiple entries? Like, for example, you can see that there is a rule E prime producing epsilon. Okay. So just focus on that rule. You can see E prime is producing this rule, closing parenthesis xy, whatever may be. This rule is not there in our present grammar, but suppose there was a rule like this. So here, can you tell me what would be the problem if you had a rule like this in the grammar? Yes? This rule is not there in our present grammar, but assuming we had a rule like this, then what would be the problem while constructing this parsing table? Yes? Anybody? Anybody wants to say anything here? Like, I am giving an additional rule, E prime producing closing parenthesis xy. Xy can be anything. Doesn't really matter. But you can see the right-hand side of the production rule is producing a closing parenthesis as the first symbol. Then what would be problem? What would be the problem? Okay. If you understood what would be the problem, then I can go to the next slide, because that is very important. Okay, we have already seen this moves by predictive parser, and we have seen in detail how the parse tree is constructed. Pranay was very active on that day with me. Okay, now we come to the next slide, which is LL1 grammars. LL1 grammars, here L stands for, the first L means scanning from the input from left to right. Okay, in general, in most of the parsing algorithms, we are going to use our scanning of the input should be from left to right. But you must be aware that there are languages, natural languages, where scanning is from right to left. Okay. But that procedure we are not going to follow for any of the parsers here, which are basically going to recognize a context-free language. Okay. So the input will be scanned from left to right. The second L, so there are two L's there. First L is for input being scanned from left to right. The second L is basically standing for the derivation type. It is for leftmost derivation. As I said, LL stands for scanning the input from left to right, and it is trying to construct the parse tree following a leftmost derivation. Okay, following a leftmost derivation. As we have already seen while doing the parsing action yesterday, on Wednesday, that the moves by the predictive parser was basically a leftmost derivation. It was simulating a leftmost derivation. As we will see in bottom-up parser, this is not going to work. In bottom-up parser, we have to do something else. It will construct the same parse tree if it is an unambiguous grammar. We have already defined an unambiguous grammar where for a certain input string, there can be only one parse tree generated from that particular grammar. So whether you are using top-down or bottom-up should not be causing any difference in the output parse tree, the finally output parse tree. But the way the parse tree is constructed is going to be absolutely different. Now, in case of top-down parsing, we are always going to construct the parse tree, assuming it is a leftmost derivation at every step. In case of bottom-up parsing, that's not going to be valid. We'll see that it is a different type of derivation. The one, yes, Pranay?
Sir, I had a question from the third point that second L will produce the leftward derivation. So, sir, I can say that the first number of L will produce rightmost derivation.
No, here it is a nomenclature. It has nothing to do with L. L stands for left. Okay. So in the first case, L stands for scanning left from left to right. In the second, the second L stands for leftmost derivation. Okay. Uh, if you use a R as the second letter, then it would be rightmost derivation. Okay. That kind of thing. We have already defined what is the leftmost and what is the rightmost derivation. Remember one of the earlier slides. Okay. Now, what does 1 stand for? The 1 is basically for one input symbol of look ahead at each step to make parsing action decisions. If you remember, in this particular move, we are trying to simulate using the stack. We are actually looking into one input symbol at a time, not more than that. Okay, so basically, the 1 comes from there. Now, a grammar whose parsing table has no multiply defined entries is said to be LL1. Okay, note this. So LL1 grammars cannot have multiple defined parsing table entries in the parts table it has constructed. Like here you can see in this particular table, there is no table entry where there are multiple rules. Okay, as you can see, every table entry has at most one rule. Now, if you include this rule in the grammar, now you don't have single entry rules for every cell. Why? Because there is already a rule E prime producing epsilon in the second row, last but one column. So that corresponds to E comma closing parenthesis. So that rule E prime producing epsilon is very much there. Why? Because closing parenthesis is in follow of E prime. Now, if you have a rule like this, E prime producing closing parenthesis xy, then the right hand side of this production rule is actually creating a closing parenthesis as the first symbol. So in this particular case, E prime colon closing parenthesis will have this rule as well. So it will have both E prime producing xy and E prime producing epsilon in the E prime comma cell. Is basically the second row and fifth column. That particular cell will have two entries, E prime producing closing parenthesis xy and E prime producing epsilon, because both are valid according to the parsing table construction algorithm. Now, in this particular parsing table, this particular cell has two entries. So, as per the property of LL1 grammar, it is having multiple defined entries. So, it cannot be an LL1 grammar or it cannot be an LL1 parser. So what are the specialities of LL1 grammars? LL1 grammars have several distinctive properties. No ambiguous or left recursive grammar can be LL1. So if you want to produce an LL1 grammar, you have to make it left recursion free and ambiguous. Now, this is a common question in GATE. You are given a set of rules and find out whether it can be an LL1 parser or not. So what are the things you need to watch out for? So when you have, see, multiply defined entries can be for only those rules, only for those terminals where there are multiple rules. Like capital A is a non-terminal which is producing alpha or beta. So there are two different rules, A producing alpha and A producing beta. That's when we can have a conflict of choices. We can have multiple entries. So what needs to be done? Now, if A producing alpha and A producing beta, both of them producing the same terminal symbol, say plus, then A comma plus should be having both the rules. So that means first property to be held for LN1 grammars is that for no terminal A, do both alpha and beta derive strings beginning with A. That is the fundamental assumption. So you cannot have alpha and beta giving the first terminal symbol as A. So they cannot produce the same identical symbol. If they are doing that, you'll definitely have an entry which is multiply defined. That means it won't be LL1. So that is the first condition which has to be fulfilled. So if you are given a grammar, you watch out for alternate production rules and see if they are having the same first symbol. If they are having the same first symbol, it cannot be LL1. Also, if both of them are deriving the empty string, that means for any of the follow symbols, both the rules need to be present. So that means only one of alpha and beta are allowed to derive the empty string. If both of them derive the empty string, then also there will be multiple entries and it won't be LL1. Now suppose alpha does not produce epsilon and beta produces epsilon. In that case, what will happen? Suppose alpha generates a terminal symbol A as the first symbol, and beta produces epsilon, and that same A is in follow A. Then, just like the previous case, here what was happening? E prime epsilon and closing parenthesis is in follow of epsilon, and E prime producing closing parenthesis xy. That means the first symbol here is closing parenthesis again. So if A producing alpha does not produce epsilon, but beta produces epsilon, then alpha should not derive any string beginning with a terminal which is in follow A. Because if it does, then for that particular terminal, A comma that terminal, we need to put both A comma A producing alpha, because alpha is deriving that terminal as the first symbol, and A producing beta should be there also, because beta produces epsilon, and as per the rule, whatever is in follow A, for all those terminal symbols, we should attach this rule A producing beta. Now since the terminal is in follow A, we have to include that. So there would be conflict between A producing alpha and A producing beta in this case, or there would be multiple entries. So you won't be able to make a sure move whether to use A producing alpha rule or to use the rule A producing beta. Okay, am I clear? So whenever you are given a grammar and you are asked to check whether it is LL1 or not, you should first check whether the alternate rules are deriving the same first symbol, or whether both of them derive epsilon. In both these cases, this is not an LL1 grammar. Now, if one of them derives epsilon, the other one does not, make sure that follow A does not contain a terminal which is derived by alpha as the first symbol. So if these three conditions are satisfied, then a grammar can be LL1, otherwise not. So here we conclude the discussion on top-down parsers and in general the parsing theory. Now we'll go to the bottom-up parser, which is the most widely used parser till a few years back. In fact, even in 2018, I had the wrong impression that most of the practical parsers are built using the bottom-up approach. But nowadays, I'm seeing a plethora of top-down parsers, and some of them may be given to you as the lab assignment, which you have to do in December and submit at the end. That is the terminal project for labs. You will see that there are parsers which are basically top-down in nature, and they are very much being accepted. But according to the parsing theory, bottom-up parsers, although it is a little different than the conventional parsing activity for context-free grammars, it is actually you have never seen this in your theory of computation classes, where you are probably more familiar with the top-down approach. But here, instead of starting from the start symbol, we start from the terminal symbols, and then we work up in a bottom-up manner towards the root of the tree. That means we are constructing the parse tree starting from the leaf nodes towards the root node, which is quite counterintuitive. So you need to understand how this can be done correctly. Okay, and it's not very easy. I hope that I can complete it by next week, but I probably need more time for that. It's not so easy to understand initially because it's kind of counterintuitive. Okay, so and this is shown to be more efficient than top-down parsers. We'll define what is meant by efficient and stuff like that, or powerful, things like that. So we introduce a general style of bottom-up syntax analysis known as shift-reduce parsing. There can be different types of bottom-up parsers as well. The one we are going to do is known as shift-reducing. So what is shift and what is reduce, we'll define appropriately in proper places. Shift-reduce parsing action attempts to construct a parse tree for an input string beginning at the leaves, that is the bottom, and working up towards the root, that is the top. So we can think of this process as one of reducing a string W to the start symbol of the grammar. So you are given an input string, you at every step you reduce the string. So that means you are incorporating more and more non-terminal. So it is exactly the opposite of top-down parsing. Top-down parsing, at every step, you include more and more terminal symbols so that you can match the input string. Here, you start from the given input string, which is a set of terminals, collection of terminals, and you replace terminals at every step by a corresponding non-terminal, which is at the left-hand side of the rule. So in top-down parsing, we are starting from the left-hand side of a rule and trying the right side of the production rule. That's how you are doing it. Here we'll try to match the right-hand side of a rule and reduce it to the left-hand side. Because as we know, in context-free grammar, the left-hand side contains always at least equal to or less number of symbols compared to the right-hand side.
So your share is off, I think.
Oh, okay, right. Thank you. So this is basically the shift-reduce parsing. So that means on the right-hand side, whatever is there, you basically reduce them to the left-hand side. The left-hand side is guaranteed to contain equal to or less number of symbols compared to the right-hand side. Because in a context-free grammar, we know that the left-hand side will always have only one non-terminal symbol. Okay, the right-hand side can consist of one or more terminal and non-terminal symbol combination. Okay, so if you are going from right-hand side to the left-hand side, the length of the string is always going, the length of the sentential form is always going to be reduced as you go backward towards the root. And finally, you basically try to reach the starting symbol as the root. If that happens, that means the string is accepted by the grammar. It is syntactically correct. So that's why they are using the term reducing.
So at this point, at each reduction step, the right side of the production is replaced by symbol on the left side of the production. So
Right.
I had confusion this.
It is a little confusing. It will just take this statement right now. Okay, that this is how it is done. How it is done exactly we'll consider in next few classes. Okay. So you can see, so the last statement is also not easily understood. I'll explain it as we go forward. So just remember it that if the substring is chosen correctly at each step, a rightmost derivation is actually traced out in reverse. This is an important statement as I'll be explaining in the next class. You can see this example, but it's not as clear as it should have been. So I'll give more examples to make sure that you understand the concept. As you can see, these are the rules. S producing small a, capital B, small e. Then A producing capital A, small b, small c, or small b. B produces small d. Now we have a sentential form A, B, B, C, D, E. That is a string in the language. Okay, so we need to find out whether it is actually generated by this grammar or not. You can try the top-down approach very easily. You can start with A, S, and then try the production rule one by one, and finally reach the sentence A, B, B, C, D, E. That's how we did the parsing activity. All the examples we have seen so far. Here you see it's a different thing. So here you start with ABB, CDE. Now, somehow you find out that from this sentential form, there is a right-hand side of rule which can be reduced. What is that? You can see that the first B is reduced to a capital A. That means we are trying to match the right-hand side of the rule A producing small b. Okay, so small b, from small b we get to the capital A. Now, the next step, as you can see, A, B, C, the whole thing, capital A, small b, small c, the whole thing is taken as a collection, and then corresponding reduction is applied to it to get the terminals, non-terminal capital A. That means here we are using A producing ABC rule in reverse. So we get ADE. Now we can see that B to D rule is applied in reverse. So we get AABE. And that is exactly the right-hand side of the first rule, S producing AABE. So we can reduce it to capital A. So you can see from a given sentential form, we are actually trying to reduce it to the start symbol. Okay, now if you look at the derivation, you start from S, for example. So first step, S producing AABE. If you go backward, how did it happen? S producing AABE, then you can see that not capital A, but capital B is producing capital D, small d, sorry. So we get ADE, and then the corresponding strings follow till we get ABB, CDE. So note the second step. In the second step, we have two non-terminal symbols, capital A and capital B. Had it been a leftmost derivation, we would have applied the rule on capital A because leftmost derivation requires that. But what we are doing here is, we are, instead of choosing capital A, we are choosing capital B. So this is not a leftmost derivation. This is in fact a rightmost derivation. Okay. So, so what we are doing here is, if you start from S, what you are doing is you are doing a rightmost derivation to go to the final string. So when you come backward from the final string towards S, what are you doing? You are tracing a rightmost derivation, but you are tracing it in reverse. Okay. So that's why you can see the last statement of this PPT. If the substring is chosen correctly at each step, a rightmost derivation is traced out in reverse. How the substring is chosen correctly, we'll explain it in following classes. But once you have done that, using this bottom-up parsing, this type of bottom-up parsing, which is known as the shift-reduce class of bottom-up parsing, you can trace a rightmost derivation in reverse, and you will be able to generate the parse tree in a bottom-up manner. Okay. Now, most important point, as Pranay said correctly, at each reduction step, a particular substring is matched on the right-hand side of a production, and then it is replaced by the left-hand side. Like for example, take the second step from top, A, capital A, B, C, D, E. Now, how do you know? You have to match the substring A, B, C. Capital A, small d, small c. That is the substring to be reduced to capital A. How do you find out such substrings? Okay, that is basically the power of bottom-up parsing. That's what we are going to learn. Okay, so we'll come to the next class to talk about some important concepts known as handle and viable prefix. Okay.
Sir, the bottom-up parsing, sir, if you explain it with example, then it will be better to understand.
There will be many examples, so don't worry. Okay. So next week we'll be learning two important concepts known as handle, viable prefix, and using these concepts, how can we do what is known as handle pruning. So if you understand these things, we'll be understanding how the bottom-up parser works in general. Then we'll start then we'll understand how these handles and viable prefixes can be computed. We can actually carry out the parsing activity. So that's where I end today.